Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. Make sure you go check out all my books. Start with the best-selling Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and the 2 workbooks that are fillable that go right along with it, the Threat Assessment and Defense Assessment workbooks. Also, for your children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. Now, that's a book of pictures you give to your children, and you let them go through it, and in the pictures are lessons about security and awareness, and you, the parent, go over to teamlittlebigs.com and download the free lesson plans that go with each picture. All of this is a package that makes your life, your family more aware, safer, and able to look at yourself from the attacker's point of view. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's 2 accompanying workbooks, and The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and the lesson plans that exist on teamlittlebigs.com. Go check them out wherever books are sold. And let's start the show.
And the wrong mistake would have been to say, okay, here we go, there's National Guards, let's go to places where people are black and brown because that's where it's going to happen. We've seen the opposite.
This is Jonathan Gilliam back in on the Experts Podcast. And the truth has arrived. And today, I always promise, or not promise myself, promise myself is what I do, that this is going to be a shorter show. Hopefully this will. I don't know if you realize this. I always do my shows before I go to bed because I stay up and watch the news or I research, and then by the time I get to it, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. That's okay. Listen, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. People should be awake. Love that song. Melissa Bernos, go check her out on iTunes. Today is going to be an interesting show. I think it's going to be quick because I really don't have a lot to cover. I mean, I've been watching the news constantly nonstop, and there's a couple of things that have really just jumped out at me. And as you know, if you listen to this show, I don't watch the news a lot. I monitor what's happening through breaking news apps or whatever, and then, going online and seeing what the headlines are. And there's something, it really needs my attention on TV, I'll turn it on. Otherwise, I just don't turn it on. It's all op-ed. With the exception, I got to give a shout out to Rick Leventhal. This is on Fox News, right? And even if I was not conservative, listen, I can't say it enough. Fox is by and large fake conservative, okay? I could say that to the day that I die. But Rick Leventhal from Fox News, been on there forever. And Brian Yennis, amazing. Those guys were on together, I think 1 or 2 nights out of the entire time that I've been watching this stuff for 7 days of these riots and just monitoring how things build up during the day. And then and the media is just 100% editorial, 100%. Making it out to seem like these are peaceful protesters and, this has to do with George Floyd's death and doing their bidding. And it starts early in the morning. Fox and Friends, the worst. As soon as the night crew leaves Fox News, it turns into, it's like they went and got the captain of the football team in high school and a cheerleader, and they put them on TV, and then the rest of the cheerleading and football team write the news. It's just that bad. It's horrendous as soon as the night crew leaves. And it doesn't get much better throughout the day. It's CNN and MSNBC. It's every 2 minutes, it's a hit on Trump. And the way that they cover breaking news, the first couple nights actually not too bad. because there was very little editorial. I think everybody on there was just blown away by the stuff that was happening they were catching on film. And then they just started to editorialize it, and it was all opinion. And not just opinion, but they say the dumbest things. So anyway, Rick and Brian, incredible coverage. It was like watching news the way it used to be. Real journalist and a commentator that wasn't editorializing. He and Brian were going back and forth, and they were talking about what was going on, getting descriptions. Rick would press him for descriptions. They didn't have guests on there like myself to give their analysis of. They literally stuck to what was happening there, and just reported the breaking news. It was amazing. And I was like enthralled, and I was hoping that it would stay like that. But no, not really. Fox they did some stuff where they were just covering stuff when it was breaking last night, and the night before, and tonight. But it was interspersed with a lot of people who are, giving their analysis of stuff, and they would editorialize. You turn it over to CNN, MSNBC is just ridiculously stupid. Ollie, I forgot what his name is, or Ari, or whatever his name is. He got shot with a rubber bullet, which I thought was quite hilarious, and tear gassed within 5 minutes of the same thing. It was incredible watching that. That's online. You can go watch that. That actually was pretty funny, actually, to watch that. An Australian news crew got the hammer today by riot police, and I think some of them were military police, and they weren't playing. They wanted everybody to push back. I don't think people realize the difference between military police and regular law enforcement. I'm not saying that they're more aggressive, but when they press back, they're not worried as much as law enforcement about losing their job. And so when military police are put out there and they're involved in something, because this is the way they work overseas, they tell you to get back. If you don't get back, you're going to get the hammer. And this female reporter and her cameraman got when I say the hammer, they brought the hammer down on them, but they got these coolest little shields now. They're round riot shields, but they look nice and thick and almost like a Spartan shield back in the day. Although I don't know if they were actually round, but he just freaking cracked both of them until they got out of there. And I watched their news report, totally shocked. I love when the media is shocked, when the media is like appalled that they were treated like a normal person. And that's the way, just like the Trump treats the other politicians who are dirtbags and treated them, have been raping the American public for years and years and years and years. And President Trump came in, he treated them just like they were anybody else, because that's what they are. I mean, you listen to any of the shows over the past week, I talk about the ruling class and how it's absolutely criminal. And it is the one part of our citizenry that is truly separate and does truly live above the law. And in their eyes, we are truly less than they are. And there's some good people over there, Louis Gohmert, others that are in Washington, D.C. But I've sat and ate with Louis several times, talked with him in Washington, D.C. Louis is a real man. He's a real human being and a normal person that deserves respect, and he gives it. He's not part of this ruling class mindset. So my hat's off. I tip my hat to Rick and Brian for what they did was real journalism, and that hardly exists anymore. But the rest of them, I mean, between the media and the politicians and then these wacko chiefs and sheriffs that are all out there saying stupid stuff and kneeling with no masks on, holding hands a week after they were arresting people, less than a month since they shut down gyms in New Jersey. I think it was North or South. It says North Carolina, I believe, where the gym was down there, up in North New York. Gyms out in Texas, they, put people in jail who were hairdressers or owned a bar. And now, in perfect example, Michigan, Governor Whitmer, one of the dumbest, we have some of the dumbest politicians I've ever seen. De Blasio, the mayor of L.A., I forget his name right now. I got it right in front of me. And Whitmer from Detroit. These are people that are, it is just Cuomo, Garcetti, that's the mayor in LA, Garcetti. It is unbelievable how weird these people are. In fact, I should have played. Well, I did. I started the show with this soundbite, but I should have actually just went right into it. But I'm going to play a soundbite here in a minute of Garcetti that I played at the beginning of the show. It's one of the most ridiculous soundbites I've ever heard. It's just literally one. I don't want to call it a joke, because these are real people that have been elected, many of them very wealthy from living off the dole. And the stuff they do and say is the most ridiculous thing. In LA, if a week ago, if you opened your business, your restaurant, and set tables out for people to come, you would be arrested. I watched on television or on the computer, I watched LA County Sheriff's Department's deputies line up by this chain link fence that had been put up by a mayor, or no, it wasn't the mayor. It was a city councilman. And I think he's not the mayor, but he's like head of the city council, whatever that is. He's not elected. And he put a fence up because everybody else was putting the fence up. He was supposed to get it approved by the city council before he did it. He didn't do that. So in their genius mindset, when everybody started pulling theirs down, they said, no, we can't just pull it down. We have to vote on this. Okay, so you put it up and you were supposed to take a vote, but now you can't pull it down without taking a vote. It's just ridiculous. So the locals were wanting it down because it was separating them from a gigantic parking lot where they park their cars, and people were wanting to go to the beach, and they couldn't. Folks, this is less than 2 weeks ago. And they had the LA County Sheriff's Department out there with all these deputies, and one guy had a hold of the fence and he's a former Marine, was refusing to leave. And they broke up that group, and I don't know if they arrested the guy, but they were strong on arm, and then I didn't see him hit anybody, but the way they were marching forward and pushing back, of course, these people are, well, I don't know if they're all conservatives, but they weren't out there to cause trouble. So they dispersed. That was a week ago, maybe 2 weeks. Unbelievable. And now you have riots everywhere, and you have the mayor of LA kneeling with these people, holding hands with them. He had a mask on. They didn't. Just bizarre. When I say it's bizarre, it is like nothing I've ever seen before. I mean, when do you ever remember politicians in your face saying one thing and then doing another when it benefits them? Now, they've always done that, but they never did it like this in front of your face. And I don't know what's worse, them doing it or the rest of the people, even the people that are protesting out there, should have been stopping for a second and saying, okay, I've been locked down for 2 months and I haven't been able to go eat, but somehow you're here with me now, which means, if you put 10,000 people out there or 1,000 people, it's going to be hard for the cops to stop 1,000 people congregating. But when the person who's been enforcing the law and who has been guiding law enforcement in the shutdown of a city comes out and kneels with you, what does that mean? What does that mean? That nothing he was doing a week before mattered? You have police chiefs. This unbelievable. I saw, go look at my Twitter, Gilliam _seal. And you're going to see where I put a picture up. I put the video up yesterday, but I put the picture of the chief of department, Terrence Monahan, I think is how you say his name. Sickening. It is all ego. This guy on his knees holding hands with these protesters because he doesn't have the balls to break them up. I mean, New York City, I'm going to clue you in on a little bit at New York City. You're still on lockdown. You can't even open up a restaurant or a business or a store. You buy a lottery ticket. You're still on lockdown. And yet the chief of department of the NYPD gets down on his knees, the same guy who would push his officers to arrest you for opening up your restaurant is going to get on his knees with no mask and hold hands and look at the sky as though he's holy and walk away from that and then do another media hit piece today. I've never seen egos like this ever. It goes completely unchecked. It used to be only politicians in Washington, D.C., but these people have not only done the same thing they do, they took it way out on the other side of the ballpark. In Michigan, what I was going to say, the governor in Michigan, it was less than a month ago when she wouldn't let you go buy seeds. A week ago, you were shut down, and all of a sudden, bam, it's lifted right when the protests and the riots start. Not keeping it going as the riots and protests start. Listen, I had the virus like I've told everybody. Told the story. It's no joke. At least I didn't think it was a joke. It certainly wasn't a joke to the person that died that I know, and my neighbor that I had a neighbor down the street who's 48 years old that died. It wasn't a joke. So if all of a sudden, these people are out there by the tens of thousands and this thing doesn't spread, I'm calling BS on this. There's something about this lockdown. There's something here going on. And now listen, I know people are going to say, well, you've been arguing with people on Twitter. I've been arguing with people on Twitter about that they come on there, the Candace Owens types, and say that it's not real. It's just the flu. It's not the flu. If you didn't have it, you don't know. And I had the flu in January. This is totally different. Very scary. And because once it gets in your lungs, it doesn't look good once it gets in your lungs. If you have to go to the hospital, it's not good. So it is, and I would get mad at people because they say it wasn't real, or this thing about people choosing to die on the mountain about whether or not to wear a mask. You wear a mask to protect me, and I wear a mask to protect you. In case you get it and you don't know it. Here's the incubation period, which is another thing these medical Facebook geniuses were arguing about today. But these politicians and these chiefs and these sheriffs, and there was another sheriff that marched with people holding hands and no mask and slapping five. These people are either throwing complete caution to the wind for their political gain to look like they are one with the people, or they know something that we don't know, that this just isn't as contagious as they say, and it's just being used as a way to, to manufacture these crises. I don't know. I'm not a skeptical person. I'm not a tinfoil hat person, but this has got me all kind of freaked out the way that these politicians have done this. Now, I gave the whole show yesterday about the reality of the conservatives in this country and whether or not they'll actually stand up if it gets any worse. I'm not real sure if they will, but this is definitely a mountain that you can die on right here. This is definitely a mountain where you can say this is BS. And I think if there's attorneys out there or people whose business have been injured, you should be getting ready for a lawsuit. You should already start it. And all you got to do is say that guy or that girl who were locking us down a week before unlocked everything and then went out with these people without a mask, or went out there and held hands with them and encouraged it. And how can they do that and put 10,000 people at risk when I couldn't open my business and cut 30 people's hair if I was a hairdresser, or open a small little bar where 10 people come in, or a restaurant where you have, a 15 top restaurant? But it wasn't allowed a week ago. It's still not allowed in LA and many of these places. If you try to, that's what I said yesterday in a tweet. Of course, it didn't go anywhere, but I challenge everybody, open your businesses up. You see what happens when you take 1,000 people that do something together in defiance of the government because what they're saying, they don't agree with it. Well, business owners could do the same thing. If every restaurant owner in New York City opened up their restaurant, there's nothing that they can do about it. They don't have enough manpower to stop it. They don't. A couple of you may get arrested, but they're not going to stop it. And it goes with the rest of every state, every city, every town, every business. Go back to work. I think you've seen over the past week that it doesn't really matter what they say. If you have enough people to do what you want, you can get away with it in this country. It's really that simple. And actually, to tell you the truth, I've been talking about this for years to people, even when I was in the federal government. I remember I would sit there and I would hear people tell all these stories, especially in the FBI, about how much they hate this and they hate that, and that person's a jerk. And I always used to say, why doesn't everybody get together and actually do something about this? You know, it's the same thing with law enforcement. They say, you know, our department's terrible, training's awful, they waste their budget money. What if that's the way everybody feels and they don't want to spend their own money on training? Why don't they get off their asses and say we're not going to work? Because they don't want to get in trouble like everybody else. But what they don't realize is these thugs that are out there rioting, and I don't care what the media says, the same people that are out there protesting, a good vast majority of those people were also rioting at the beginning, and it's died down a little bit, but I was looking at a story today. There's somebody pulled up in a $350,000 Rolls Royce and looted a group of them and then got back in the car and drove off. Antifa is all over it. Placing bricks all over the place, cars with Molotov cocktails in them so people could grab them. It's organized, folks. It's organized. And everybody's like, well, you know, I can't stand with, you know, my militia group and walk out there, or my, you know, 50 patriot friends, because we're in trouble. These people aren't getting in trouble. I'm not saying you need to go out there and burn it down, but my goodness, go out there and show your power by standing together like they did look at Virginia. They didn't get arrested. They stood together with guns around the Capitol building. Ralph Northam could have stayed there and never let him back into office. There's nothing that Virginia State Police could have done about it. I guarantee you the National Guard wouldn't have done it, because they're not going to shoot people. They're not going to go to guns. And they could have pressured that guy to leave. I guarantee it. Same thing all over this country. But people won't do that. They won't do it, because people that have their minds right don't work together. You don't take the chances. And everybody says, well, we work for a living. Not right now. You don't. You really literally have no excuse, except for, I'm comfortable. I don't want to do that. You know, I have my thing. I have family. I have insurance. Whatever. When the country falls, it's going to fall. But watching the media and watching how these politicians work and how these protesters are so organized. Remember, it's clear to me the Hegelian dialect: cause the problem, offer the solution, handle the result. It's happening everywhere right now. That's why they don't care. That's why they caused the problem. I'm not saying that they killed George Floyd. They just used George Floyd's death as an excuse. That's what's happening. That's what's always been happening. You want to know my take on racism? Go listen to the last two shows, 38 and 37. But one thing I want to point out, two things in this show. One is how incredibly crazy these politicians and stuff are, and the things that they were saying last week versus this. But this has to be known by the patriots out there and the people who are concerned with this country. Do you realize that the left, the subversive movement in this country that's been going on for years and years, do you realize that they have done everything right? They have literally used every single crisis to their advantage. They have meetings. They coordinate. When was the last time that a group of people got together to protest the Second Amendment, and they went and they stayed out there every night causing trouble, messing? I'm not saying that's what I want people to do, but when was the last time anybody ever dominated a city until they got what they want for the right reasons? It just never happens. It never happens. So that's the one thing I wanted to point out, and I'm going to play this soundbite from this mayor. Let me pull it up here. Garcetti. Gosh, this guy looks like You know, the song, da 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 da, the one that's the ice cream machine or the ice cream man when he goes around the block. That song, that I do believe that's what is in Garcetti's head if you stuck a microphone deep enough into his ear canal. That's what you would hear. All right, let's see here. Okay, I'm going to tell you what he says, and then you can hear it. So he's talking about concerning looting. He says, the wrong mistake, which I'm not really exactly clear what a right mistake is, but he says the wrong mistake would have been to say, okay, here we go. There's the National Guards. Okay, I didn't know there was more than one National Guard. I didn't know how that works in California. He says, let's go to places where people are black and brown because that's where the looting's going to happen. He said, in other words, he's saying that would have been the wrong mistake. Okay, first of all, nobody would have said that because nobody's going to loot the inner city. They're going to go like they did in New York to Chanel and clean the store out. Here he is in his own words.
Mistake, no need, and the wrong mistake would have been to say, okay, here we go, there's National Guards, let's go to places where people are black and brown because that's where it's going to happen. We've seen the opposite.
Literally, no one would have said that. So that is the one thing that I wanted to point out. That's a soundbite I played at the beginning. But the other thing that I wanted to point out is that we have a real problem with, I've never seen so many Judases in the Christian faith as I see now. I remember watching a show where they were saying, this is on, it was a documentary, I think it was on PBS, but they were talking about the socialist movement, and they talked about how this one guy in the 1920s or 40s, I'll have to do some research and pull this back up. I just don't have it in front of me right now. How the Communist Party, which you got to remember, communism and socialism, it's really the same. Communism is just the end product that will never happen of socialism. We always think that like Russia and stuff was communism. It wasn't true communism. Because in communism, they want to get rid of the government. So you're still stuck in socialism. I didn't even know this until I got educated by Drago, and a lot of people actually get it wrong. So the documentary said that there had been over 1,000 communists, that was their words, secreted into the priesthood, the Catholic priesthood. And I don't know if there's any way to actually measure that now. But when you look at the Pope, I'm not Catholic, but I'm Christian. But when you look at the Pope and what he says, he's definitely a socialist, far left. And when you look at the Episcopalian bishops and priests, they have females in there, and they've allowed gays in the Episcopalian priesthood. I have nothing to say about anybody who is gay. I really don't care about somebody's sexuality. I really don't think that it makes one difference as to who you are, unless that's the hill that you're going to die on. I've started using that term a lot because that seems to be what these activists are. But the problem with it is that those people, the females, because it's never really been accepted in the Christian faith that females would be preachers or priests, and that's a new thing. But a lot of the women that did make it into the priesthood are activists. And the ones who were gay, who were in there, are also activists who are openly gay. They're activists. So instead of it just being their sexuality, it becomes their thing. And they're leftist. They're automatically leftist. So it's a real problem when they come on television, and because these people are media whores just like everybody else. And they're just like the Pharisees that hung Jesus up on the cross. It's all ego and no understanding of God and his word. And this hasn't, again, I'm not saying this to clarify anything, but you have to realize this has nothing to do with sexuality. It has to do with leftist activism. And so when President Trump went and did the little picture thing where he was standing in front of the church that got burned right outside the White House, and he held up the Bible. I thought it was a terrible photo op. I thought the whole thing that they did, I know the reasons why they did it. I mean, to project strength in front of the church where the fire had been and where these in direct confrontation with these leftists. That part I really liked about it. But I didn't like the optics of the whole thing, and it was very stiff, and it didn't look like a man of faith holding the Bible. I didn't like it. I'll be honest with you. But listen, if the president holds up the Bible, I'm not going to condemn him for it, even if it's a bad photo op. I would rather have him had a bad photo op and go over there and hold the Bible up and be totally, where it really doesn't matter to him whatsoever. I'm not saying that's what it is, but I'm just saying if it was the case, it doesn't bother me because the Word of God got held up. And I believe that there's power in that book. I don't believe it. I know it. And he held that book up, and it to me, it meant a tremendous amount, regardless of the intent. And several of these female gay bishops, and then one priest who is on CNN, go figure, Father Edward Beck, they all go on CNN and bash the president. Now, I don't care if they agreed with it or not. They should feel the same way. They should be encouraging any president or any leader to hold up the Bible. I don't care if that leader is totally disingenuous. They should be encouraging the Bible to be held up. And they should build upon that, and say, hey, it may have been ingenuous, or it may have been, I don't know, I'm butchering this word. It may have been something that they really felt or not. Disingenuous, that's the word, my brain's out there. Or it may have been real. To them, that shouldn't matter. God's intent and the fact that the Bible was held up in front of a church it was burnt should be something that they use as a teaching point and something as a positive, but they turn it into a negative. And I'm shocked again. 2020 is like a lightning bolt for me. I'm shocked over and over again at how many of these Judases exist, not just in the Christian faith, but on television. It's like a thing now. It goes right in line with the false prophet and how these people are pushing people to believe something that's not real. It's not written in the Bible. If you don't believe in the Bible as real, then don't kid yourself. You've got a real problem with Christianity. If you believe in Jesus, you will believe in every word of the Bible. And these people don't preach that. And so they're false prophets. For those of you that aren't Christian, or those of you that are liberal, you may say, well, that's kind of tin hat. Like, no, it's really not. It's what I believe. And I've been lectured by people who said, don't you know that the world was populated by aliens? And they're going to believe that, okay? They're going to believe that, which there's no proof of that, rather than taking a book that is actually a compilation of multiple books that has never changed since they were written for thousands of years. We don't actually know when the Old Testament, parts of the Old Testament were written. And that in of itself is a tremendous proof for me that it's real. But other than that, it's what the words that are inside of it. Whenever somebody debates me on the Bible, I know that they haven't read it and understood it. There's a big difference between reading something and understanding it. And you should pray for understanding when you read. But it's unbelievable how many of these zealots are out there that are fake, that are all over television, and how the media just fawns over them because they know that they're up there, that no different than you put, a Navy SEAL on television. People are going to stop when they hear that, and they're going to look at the television, or special forces, or here's a veteran. He's got no legs. They were blown up in Iraq. People are going to stop and look at the television. They don't care that the guy's a veteran or that he got his legs blown off. They're using him as a prop. Anybody that thinks that they're on television because they're not a prop, you're wrong. So this is becoming more common, and it's all a part of this same game that's being played. It's all the same. Now, I'm a servant to the country and to God. I was not sent here to judge. I was sent here to do what God tells me to do, to follow his will, and to ensure freedom stands in this country. But what I am convicted of doing is pointing out false prophets, because they're prevalent everywhere. And it's not a judgment. It's no different than saying 2 + 2 = 4. I'm not judging somebody that says, 2 + 3 = 4, because they don't know how to count or they don't know math. I'll instruct that person, say, no, look, this is the way it is. There's, teach them math. 2 + 2 = 4. Show them why. But when people come out there and they propel themselves as though they understand how, math, and I don't know why I chose math, because I'm the worst at math. But in the case of Christ, when they come out there and they lead people astray as to the reality of that word, I have no problem pointing that out, because it is factual. What's in the book is factual, just like 2 + 2 = 4 is factual. So this is just happening so much and so fast. We just completely skipped over the murder hornets. But these Judases are everywhere now. Even Nancy Pelosi, who gets up there and talks about how she's Catholic and this and that, and any of the Democrats or any of you out there that agree with killing babies, but yet you profess that you're a Christian. Nope. And one last thing. I saw Andrew McCabe on CNN today. It was a wake-up call, because I've been watching the news so much and getting kind of drawn into this stuff. And when McCabe came on there, it was like, that guy is truly a criminal traitor. He worked and conspired with others who were not in jail still. Thank you, A.G. Barr. For trying to overthrow a duly elected president and the election itself. And he's on there, and they're talking to this guy like he's some kind of superhero. It was sick. I'm glad you don't have to watch this stuff and I could watch it for you, because it's sick. It's very sick. But you know what else was sick? Trey Gowdy came on Fox News today. He's always been like they're one of their little hero boys on there. And he literally is talking about how to stop these protests and these riots, right? Riots, because he says the protests are peaceful. Even though when law enforcement approaches the protesters at curfew, they throw bottles at them. But they're still peaceful. Trey Gowdy comes on Fox and talking kind of in support of the president, actually. But then he says, and I'm going to quote Malcolm X here. He says, things need to get done by any means necessary. That phrase is a communist, socialist, flag-waving phrase. And he said it twice, and then I heard it again later on another news station. So somehow this narrative of by all means necessary has come out amongst the conservatives of all places and is trying to be normalized. And you have to realize, if you hear that phrase, no one uses that phrase except for, I guess a general. And they're like, sir, how do you want us to, conquer that hill? By any means necessary. Get it done. Okay. I could see it there. But probably not even there. I mean, if Trey Gowdy came on and said, listen, we need to use whatever is in our arsenal to an extent, a reasonable extent, as far as tactics and procedures go and techniques, we should use those things to the extent that we can to stop these riots. Now, That is something that a former United States attorney and congressman should be able to articulate, not using a communist phrase. I can't keep saying that I'm shocked. It's just very, very odd. It's very odd what his motivation was to quote Malcolm X and say that. Very strange. And I'm going to cut it there, because I'm going to repeat myself. And one thing I learned in the SEAL teams, we had a chief, God bless him, in my platoon that we would spend all day training. Last thing the guys wanted to do was be there any longer afterwards, but we would hot wash the events of the day. And it only takes one time to go through that. Guys would take notes. But our chief would constantly say the phrase, like I said before. And as soon as he said that, you knew he was going to repeat everything that he said before. And by the third time, people are just like, good gosh, get over it, Chief. Or what we get what you're saying. I don't want to be that guy. But I do want to be the guy that brings the truth to you and that makes these things known. It's happening right in front of you. And I know you don't want to watch the news, but folks, this stuff is happening. It's happening fast. And you need to be aware of that. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace. And we out of here.